Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, the voice of Hera Syndulla from Star Wars Rebels, wishing Jay and Dennis huge congratulations on 1,000 episodes of fully armed and operational podcasting on Podcast Stardust. Here's to many more missions. May the Force be with you always.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And as we usually do, we are starting the week off with the next episode in our The Clone Wars rewatch. But before we get into that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Of course, we are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we're going to be discussing episode 12 from season 3 of the Clone Wars, which is called Nightsisters. You and I were kind of joking with each other offline that we're going to really have to watch the clock on this because I have a feeling we could go on for a very long time with everything that comes up in this one. But since it is Monday, we're trying to keep this these episodes to a respectable length so people can get on with their weeks. We will try to behave. So with that said, Jay, you want to go ahead and give everybody the summary of this episode?
I would love to. During an engagement with a Republic fleet, Asajj Ventress finds herself cornered by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. As that plays out, Darth Sidious commands Count Dooku to eliminate her because Asajj is becoming too powerful, and Sidious suspects Dooku might try to challenge him. Reluctantly, Dooku denies Asajj's request for aid and orders that the Separatist fleet fire on her ship. Asajj escapes and makes her way to Dathomir and takes sanctuary with the Nightsisters. From there, Asajj recovers and, with the aid of her clan, attempts to get revenge on Dooku by assassinating him in his palace. The attempt is unsuccessful, but the seeds for another attempt to defeat him are planted.
Right. So this is the first episode in a three-parter written by Katie Lucas. So George's own daughter did this one, and it's huge. It sets up so much stuff that follows not only in the Clone Wars, but in Rebels and a little bit in the Bad Batch and in Tales of the Underworld, novels. There's so much that comes out of this episode here. And it really is a stepping stone for a lot of big things that are about to happen. So now that I've completely built it all up, Jay, what are your overall thoughts about this one?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say pretty much everything that you just did, that this episode is a game changer, and it lays the groundwork for so many things that come after it. And it also leans into a lot of things that came before it, even from Legends, expanded universe, that type of thing. But it's the first time we really start to see the Force being explored in different ways, and the different mythos, except for what we're typically used to with the light versus dark, that type of thing. And, all of the ways that these decisions are really hinging on a lot of stakes. And how this goes forward from here is just, wow. Yeah. So it's superb storytelling and world building and just a lot going on. And I'm so excited to unpack it.
Right. So let's just talk a bit about Asajj herself. So the episode guide on StarWars.com is really good and gives you plenty of good background, whether you're looking at the trivia section or concept art or whatever about this. Not only talking about the origins of the character of Asajj Ventress, but her in-universe backstory. So we've talked about this a little bit in the past. Asajj Ventress was originally developed from a piece of concept art for a potential female Sith Lord by Dermot Power, which is a name I have to admit that I'm not terribly familiar with. That idea was eventually abandoned. I mean, I think it goes back all the way to the Phantom Menace, but then the art was repurposed as a Separatist commander for various tie-in things for the prequel trilogy, and Asajj Ventress was born. So she appeared in Dark Horse comics and various novels and toys after that. And I know we talked about this in the past. I remember her first from the Dark Horse comics, and then of course she showed up in Gendy Tartakovsky's microseries
Mm-hmm.
as this Sith apprentice. But where all had you encountered her prior to the Clone Wars?
Well, the first time was in the Tartakovsky Clone Wars,
Mhm.
and that was always something that I know when my boys were little, we would watch over and over and over again, that micro series, and it was just a piece of Star Wars lore that I always was fascinated with and just kinda tucked away. And then when she reappeared, in the Clone Wars itself and started to have her own adventures, and then this character was being explored and this backstory was being built, I thought, wow, okay, this is exploding and I'm here for every second of it.
Yeah, yeah. I remember from those Dark Horse comics, and it's not exactly the same as we got to know her in the Clone Wars, or either Clone Wars series and things like that. But it was an interesting character. A lot of great art that came up around her, and she was vicious. I remember her. I think it may have been Jabim, or I can't remember what the planet was. That there was a battle going on, and all of a sudden, from off screen, she just takes off a Jedi Knight's head. They didn't pull any punches
Mhm.
with those comics. She was vicious. She was lethal in those. And George Lucas liked the character, so he repurposed her here for the Clone Wars. Over the course of this episode, or in one key scene, I should say, where she's having flashbacks while being healed by the Nightsisters, and we'll talk about them in just a second, we get into her past. She was taken from the Witches of Dathomir as a baby and handed over to a Centene criminal named Halstead. We don't know why, but that's what happened. And then on the planet Ratatak, she is discovered by Jedi Knight Kai Narek after Halstead has been killed by Weequay Raiders. And then she trains as a Jedi Padawan under Kai Narek. It doesn't appear she ever was taken to the temple or became ever part of the Jedi hierarchy that way. But when he dies, she uses her rage to take up his lightsaber and her own and get revenge. And she eventually is discovered by Dooku and becomes his apprentice. So, like, Asajj Ventress 101 in a nutshell, right there.
Mhm.
What did you think
Mhm.
about that backstory?
Oh, I love it. And here's the thing, we got a lot of that later on, obviously in the novel Dark Disciple as well. And some of I guess you could say repercussions of her backstory. But as you pointed out from the Dark Horse comics and everything, this was a vicious, vicious character. And they really kind of had to tone her down in a lot of ways in the Clone Wars.
Yep.
And she was still very vicious, as we've talked about several times in the past. But this particular episode kind of shifts her from this all-out villain to more of a like a nuanced anti-hero, or even like a tragic figure. And I think that that humanization of her even makes her more of a likable, complex character. And I think that that shift that we see here and almost that kind of softening of who Asajj is even adds that layer of dimension that is just it's fantastic.
Yeah, it certainly is the beginning of that journey, because
Mhm.
she's bent on revenge in this episode in a major
Right.
way. And,
Mhm.
it's a lot going on with her. But I want to take a step back. We really get an idea of how potentially powerful she can be very early on in this episode, because she's using that same fan fighter that she had in the Gendy Tartakovsky Clone Wars
Mhm.
series to lead the Separatist forces in this battle. And when she crashes into the hangar with Obi-Wan right behind her, she calls for help, and that's after Sidious has already told Dooku, "You have to destroy Asajj. She's getting too powerful." And when he refuses it, she taps into that rage and anger, even after she's been disarmed by Obi-Wan and Anakin, and just lets them have it with the dark side, force choking them both at the same time. They're nearly powerless to do anything until a droid fighter crashes into the hangar.
Right. And that's been Asajj's whole life. She's been cast aside.
Mhm.
She's been just basically canceled out by everyone that ever either believed in her or she was taken away from them or whatever. And so Dooku put that exclamation point on it. And so that her rage was so fresh at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it was just whew, savage.
Right. And we'd be remiss if we didn't note that this was the first appearance of Obi-Wan Kenobi in his new character model for season 3. So most of the clone armor has been removed from his costume, and he's wearing primarily Jedi robes besides the bracers on his forearms. So
Yeah.
neat to see.
And did you get the feeling that a lot of that particular scene with them fighting in space and then going into the hangar of the separatist ship and all of that very much mirrored the beginning of Revenge of the Sith in a lot of ways?
Yes, and also the opening episodes from Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, with the way that
Yes.
they were like luring the fighters and the missiles and things around there to create collisions. So I think there was inspirations from both of those things happening right
Mhm.
there at
Good
that
point.
scene. Yeah. So Asajj makes her escape, and she runs into some scavengers. She deals with the scavengers. She takes their ship to Dathomir, where she runs into the Nightsisters. So this is the introduction of the Nightsisters and Dathomir into the Clone Wars. And I know we've talked about this in the past. This is a bunch of stuff that was adapted from Dave Wolverton's The Courtship of Princess Leia, which I know we
Yes.
talked quite a bit when we talked about that book about Han and Leia's wedding a couple years ago.
Mhm.
So uh, very different. I don't want to say that because they've kind of adapted some more of Wolverton's stuff and modified a little bit with what we got to see in Tales of the Tales of the Empire. Because when we got everyone's Morgan Elsbeth's character kind of fleshed that out further because she's our other Dathomir witch gone out into the greater galaxy. But any rate, back in the Courtship of Princess Leia, the witches were a bit more savage, bit more tribal. You know, they rode rancors. There was a Singing Mountain clan, which is a different type of witch. I
Mhm.
don't know that these Night Sisters you could neatly say that they're adapted from either one of them. I kind of feel like they draw characteristics from both of those. But what's your take?
No, I would agree, and I think that this is the evolution of those characters sort of combined in a lot of ways, but yet they also create their own mythos and their own, even though it's Dathomir and we do get
Mhm.
some of those references that we've gotten in the past, it's completely new in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And it's very mystic and very, as I was saying, like this exploring of the Force from a completely different aspect.
Yeah, I do remember there being a lot of excitement at this time when this episode was coming out, and Dathomir and Night Sisters,
Right.
because we
Yeah.
did we did have a lot of history. Although that they originated in the Courtship of Princess Leia, they came to be a huge part of what's now Legends after that. And
Mhm.
Lieutenant Joe and Rancors and just tons and tons of stuff came out of the Night Sisters and so that book. And so it's a little bit different. I remember back in the Star Wars Galaxies MMORPG days, you could go to Dathomir and fight Rancors, and occasionally you'd run into Night Sisters and the things like that. And so you had to be very careful on that planet. But this was a big deal getting them there. So moving on, we meet Mother Talzin. And again, it's another reused concept for a potential villain from the prequels there, which just goes to show no good idea ever truly dies with Lucasfilm. So,
Right.
um, but at any rate, she's helping Asajj in this. What do you make of Mother Talzin? The more I see of her, the more I like this character. She's in a way kind of like playing a similar game that Palpatine does. She's always thinking several moves ahead. That is, if this happens, except for where Palpatine says everything's proceeding as I have foreseen. With Talzin, it is she seems to be like almost like Doctor Strange, looking at the time stone, looking and seeing like possible futures, and then planning out contingencies for everything. So like she
Ooh, I like
helps Asajj go to get revenge on Dooku, but when that doesn't work, there's a possibility born out of that. And as we'll see, like in later episodes with things that happen to the Night Sisters, she even had contingencies for some of those things. But what do you make of her?
She's a tough one to pin down, honestly, because on one end of things, you think to yourself, okay, she's wanting to insert the Night Sisters and the Dathomiri type of force use into the galaxy somewhere. But then again, it's like, to what end? What is, as you said, what is her end game, and what is she truly trying to to do by that? What is she trying to accomplish by doing that? But because obviously she's not necessarily 100% to just be content with having her clan on Dathomir and minding their own business. She's obviously wanting to have these tendrils of her power out in the galaxy, but I've never truly understood to what end.
Yeah, she seems to me that she's not interested in galactic conquest the way that
Right.
Palpatine is. She's more interested in the welfare of her clan, and also like exploring. One of the things you brought up at the beginning of this discussion is that we have another way of seeing the Force
Mhm.
through them, and that view, I think, is something that we kind of. I mean, is it really the Force, or is it a blend of the Force and the magic, and we're ascribing it to the Force because Asajj Ventress had powers in the Force?
Mhm.
You understand what I'm saying? It's
Yes,
it's a
I do.
it's not just because Luke can use the Force doesn't mean like everything that humans do is the Force. Lousy comparison, but I'm trying to illustrate a point here, and I'm struggling with it. I think it's a blend of both. I think it's a
Mhm.
little bit of Night Sister magic that is outside the Force, blended with some Force ability type things, because not every Night Sister can do all this stuff. And a
Mhm.
lot of it is like rituals that's being done by a bunch of people participating together, which doesn't necessarily mean it's not the Force. But, Asajj has a unique ability to call on the Force in the way that most of the Night Sisters do not.
Right. And that's, kind of begs the question too, once again, why did Mother Talzin give Asajj up to Halstead when she was an infant, if she knew that her abilities went beyond quote unquote simple Night Sister magics,
Yeah, I mean, good question. I
you
don't
know?
know that we have an answer to that. I think it's what did Halstead have over her in that
Right.
situation that required
Mhm.
that. So, but she always anticipated that Asajj would make her way back and had hoped to be before then, but now she's back. So,
Right.
yeah, interesting character. I like her a lot. And of course, she'll come up quite a bit over the course of the Clone Wars, Rebels, and other stories, comics, and the like. She appears in quite a few places. So be on the lookout for that.
Mhm.
So, Talzin and the Night Sisters create a potion that is going to make Asajj and the other two Night Sisters that are coming with her, Naleth and Karis, effectively invisible. Now, for our benefit, they make them look shadowy so we can actually see what they're doing, which is appreciated. And not only that, they give him a poison dart that will kind of dull Dooku's senses. And then they go to Sereno to attempt to kill Dooku in his palace. But to further disguise themselves, they're using Jedi lightsabers. I wonder where they got the lightsabers
Me
from.
too. Thank you. I was thinking
Who
the
do those
same thing.
belong to?
Right?
What'd you think about this whole plan in the attack on Dooku?
Well, part of me thinks to myself, did Mother Talzin truly believe that they were going to be successful? And to what end? Why would she care whether or not Dooku perished or not, other than just for the simple act of revenge? But, then again, I just thought this was so fabulous in the way that they showed the Night Sisters, as you said, with this mist the shadow mist potion for invisibility. It was such a great concept, and the idea of them going to, kind of sabotage or ambush Count Dooku while he was in his chambers in his exquisite pajamas, might I add.
Mhm.
And that's a whole other story. But could they have truly taken him out? Because we kind of know, here's the thing, we get to know the fact that Mother Talzin kind of has I don't know if you want to call it a relationship necessarily with Sidious or Palpatine, but she knows him. And so how does that whole puzzle kind of fit together with wanting to have Dooku eliminated, and what advantage does that give Mother Talzin? Or did she think that she would be unsuccessful, and that puts her into the chess position where she ends up at the end of the episode, meaning, Mother Talzin
Yeah,
with a
I mean,
little leverage. Yeah.
my take on it is this: is just she doesn't have designs on galactic conquest, but she is interested in a couple things. One, the well-being of her clan. Two, the individuals of her clan. Three, exploring her powers, whether it's force, witchcraft, or some combination, as we were just discussing a little bit. Dooku has betrayed one of her own in this situation, and so Talzin has got to balance some things. She wants to help Asajj get revenge because that's one of her own, but two, they can't just be overt about it because it will lead to the Separatists and Sidious and Dooku attacking them outright, which we
Mhm.
know happens later in this series. So she's got to balance things. And three, it's just in keeping the welfare of her clan in mind. Yeah, what do? You've got Asajj Ventress, who's now returned to you. She's probably the most powerful member of your clan at this point.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so you got to help her. She's one of your own. At the same time, you are not so isolated. You're isolated on Dathomir. It's a kind of a backwards world. Not everybody goes there, and you'd be foolish to, given who's there. But she knows Dooku's aware of them. She knows that Sidious is aware of them. She knows other powerful people aware of them. So yeah, we got to balance helping get revenge, but so that I can maintain the well-being of my clan and satisfy by one of my most powerful people who will be helpful in maintaining the well-being of my clan, but I can't upset the galactic powers that be because they could come
Mhm.
wipe us out. So I think there's just a lot of things that she's trying to balance when it comes down to it.
Yeah, yeah. And when you say, the powers that be or come wipe them out, that's a little foreshadowing there too.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Things are going to get messy over the next couple
Yes, they
seasons for
are.
the Nightsisters there. And it's funny because we've now most recently seen them in Ahsoka. And we
Mhm.
know that their origins isn't even on Dathomir, that they came from an entire other galaxy, and they are now on Dathomir. And in some ways, there's some people that are interested in keeping them there on Dathomir and not letting them
Mhm.
spread across the galaxy. But looks like they're about to repopulate on the planet based on what we saw. But that's for season 2 of Ahsoka later this year. So I'm really eager to see how
Yeah.
that all plays out.
Yeah.
So we get the final battle, which starts off well enough for Asajj and her Night Sister allies, but then eventually Dooku catches enough that he's able to immobilize all of them with force lightning and throw them through the window. And if it wasn't for Asajj catching onto the side of a cliff and then using the force to save the other two, they all would have perished on
Right.
that. So, we were just talking at the beginning of the beginning part of this episode, how powerful Asajj is, and Dooku is a level above that, and Sidious is a level above that. Kind of interesting little power hierarchy we were treated to in this episode. And then, as you
Indeed.
point out, the whole thing ends with Asajj returning to Dathomir and pointing out how she's failed. But Talzin says, well, we've got an opportunity. He now knows he's vulnerable, he being Dooku. So I'll reach out and offer to give him another apprentice, and we can set that up as his potential demise. So what'd you think of the plan?
Well, first of all, kind of backtracking to the chambers when they're fighting Dooku, obviously they did very sorely underestimate Dooku. And it's kind of easy to do in a way because, you're looking at this older, gentlemanly kind of former Jedi turned Sith, but he's got a lot of stuff up his sleeve that they don't expect.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's very cunning and he's very savvy. And obviously they were no match for him. But the thing that I really liked about the part of this episode when Mother Talzin is offering up a new kind of apprentice sort of thing, She says, where one sees failures, other sees opportunities. And because she knows he's vulnerable and wants to find this replacement, I love how she said he could not tame a female. So she proposes a male from their planet to try to make things better. So as a replacement.
Yeah. And that's going to lead to all kinds of interesting discussions when we get into the next episode.
Yeah.
And I have questions I don't know the answer to, and maybe I'll look them up between now and then. But yeah, I'm glad we got to this episode. It is, we got some Obi-Wan and Anakin. It still doesn't really star them. They're in it, but it doesn't feature them. Asajj is their central character in this one, and her rivalry with Dooku as it comes to be. But don't get me wrong, as much as I like Padme and Ahsoka and stuff like that, with having so many politically heavy episodes over the last half dozen, it's kind of I can't believe I'm gonna say it. It's kind of refreshing to get into these dark episodes, if you know what I mean. Because
100%.
a bit more action oriented here. So it's a different type of story that leans more into the Force, leans more into the dark side, leans more into these other aspects of Star Wars that have kind of been put on the back burner for the sake of all this political stuff for the last several episodes.
Right. And truly, I mean, this is where the series starts to hit its prime, I think. And as you said, yes, the episodes that came before were great and they're definitely worth rewatching and reviewing again and again. But this is where it really starts to pick up. And I think this is some of the most memorable Clone Wars coming up.
Yeah. The first time I got to see this and the next two was when DJ was little, and there was a screening at a movie theater of all three of these episodes back to back. They had just edited them all together as opposed to 3 individual episodes, and I got to take him to see that, and that was a fun way to do it. Everyone seeing it with a theater full of people. There was, the 501st was there. They were giving away prizes. It was a really fun way to watch Clone Wars with a bunch of other fans.
That is awesome.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to note about this before we wrap it up?
Well, just something little I had in my notes that, we get to see, as you mentioned, a little bit of Anakin and Obi-Wan, and even a little bit of that well-placed Star Wars humor when they see Asajj and Obi-Wan says, "You're not looking well," and Anakin says, "She never does."
Yeah.
I just thought that was great. But yeah, other than that, just such a great episode overall.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm glad it was, like I said, glad it came up this week.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we're just going to thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and this entry on the Clone Wars rewatch. And we hope you've enjoyed it. And if so, please consider subscribing to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice so that you'll get all of the future entries. With that being said, March is going to be a little odd. We will have a couple of new entries, but Jay and I got weird schedules coming up here. So there's going to be not necessarily 3 new episodes every week, but there will be some replays, hopefully, and we will have some new content every week. That is our plan going forward. But once you subscribed on your podcast choice, we'd love it if you could rate and review the show. That does help us grow, as well as your word of mouth, passing it on to others that might be interested in Star Wars and what we got going on. And then if you want to catch the entire back catalog of the show, all previous 1005 episodes, you can do that over at retrozap.com. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found online?
Absolutely. So you can always hit us up on our Facebook and Instagram pages at Podcast Stardust. And we also have tons of other pages on our Pinterest boards. So you can head over to that and check out all kinds of ideas for everything fun Star Wars. And then we also have our 2 YouTube outlets, which includes YouTube and YouTube Music, where you can catch all the episodes. No video, just the audio, but still wonderful to do. And please share those out to your friends as well. And then if you'd like to drop us a line, you can do so at podcaststardust@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this episode of the Clone Wars. If you're following us for our Darth Bane book club discussion, you can send us your thoughts there, your thoughts on the news, questions, anything that's on your mind. We would love to have any mail in our mailbag. And then we also have our TeePublic store where you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of fun Podcast Stardust merch. And if you do pick something up, please snap a picture and post it to your social media and tag us. And just know that every one of those purchases does help to support the show. So thanks in advance.
All right. What is the latest in cosplay?
All right. Well, as always, you can check out everything I'm up to over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And you can catch me as Ahsoka and Hera, the fourth sister, my original concept Mandalorian, and a lot of other fun stuff as well.
All right, upcoming on the show Wednesday is part 2 of our Darth Bane book club. He'll be feature chapters 4 through 6 from Path of Destruction. So make sure you get caught up before then. And then on Friday, we'll be getting back into the week's Star Wars news. So with that, thanks for listening to episode 1006 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be